Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Undercurrent Stories podcast. In today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Ian Hatton. Ian is a guitarist, songwriter and composer who has performed with bands and artists such as Bonham, who went gold with their debut album, Robert Plant, Paul Rodgers and Sarah Brightman. More recently, Ian has become an award-winning composer and producer of music for TV and films, which included an Emmy nomination for original music score for Bard in the Backcountry. As well as music, Ian launched his own brewery, the old Glenham Brewery, which produces English cask ale for the American market. Hello and welcome to the show, Ian.
Hello there. Great to meet you.
So you're originally from England, is that right? And you're based in the US?
I am. I'm from originally from Kidderminster in Worcestershire. Came out here with Bonham in 1988. We lived in LA for a bit with Bonham, and then sort of early 90s, sort of back and forth a little bit, and then I guess it would have been mid 90s I moved to New York. Which was funny because I never like when we toured around America initially, I didn't really like New York. It was just so crazy and, obviously I'm not from a big city. So, but then like rolling on a few years later, a friend of mine said, come and work with this bass player. You'll get, he's an English guy and you'll get on. And he was in New York. So I was in LA at the time, so I flew to New York and spent a few weeks. And all of a sudden, it sort of clicked. It was just much more like England, really. And so, yeah.
You've lived probably half your life then in the US now, have you?
I know, that's a little scary. I don't really, like my adult life, I've lived more in the US than England, which I don't know if I'm a fan of that, but it's okay. It is what it is. And I love it here. So,
Yeah. What's that? I mean, it's probably a difficult question to answer, but what's the main difference and attraction of living in the US, say, compared to the UK, Ian?
I mean, when I initially came here, it was because of Bonham. And then that gave me, because of Bonham's success out here, it gave me a network, if you like.
Yeah.
And in general, I feel like, actually, to be honest, America's changed a lot over the past few years, but certainly back then, much more encouragement to do anything you want. Whereas England always feels a little bit like pockets and cliquey, and it's tough to break out of the sort of local scene.
Yes.
I never really got on with. I sort of did a few things down in London with people down there, but never really. That just seems so cliquey to me. I never seemed to fit in. So yeah, it just felt more at home. It was nice.
It's interesting. We had Francis Dunnery from It Bites, who you probably know.
Yeah, I know Francis.
He was on the show a couple of years ago, and he said virtually the same thing. He felt that it was quite cliquey, particularly in London. He was from the Northwest, obviously.
That's right, yeah.
Cumbria. And he just felt that in the US you could sort of be who you wanted to be and do what you wanted to do, and people sort of respected you for what you did and good luck to you type of thing, whereas he found it was the opposite in the UK. But you say that it's changed a little bit in the US.
I think only because it's got tougher out, and the whole world has just got tougher, I think, with music, the music scene and that. But no, that's exactly the way it felt, to come out here. Just more, it's, I don't know, that English thing of like, it's like it's not being stabbed in the back or anything like that, but sort of people almost don't want to see you do well, It's like, there's a definite click, and it just, I never felt it when I came out here.
That's interesting. Anyway, just going back to, I'd love to talk about how you got into music, if that's okay. Could you just tell us a little bit about your sort of earlier life and your life's journey and how you got into music and playing the guitar, please?
Well, I guess I would have been about 12, perhaps. And my brother bought a guitar, because he was an electric guitar he was going to try and learn, and he also he's my older brother by a few years, and he also was really into music. So I was listening to all of his music through the wall sort of thing, and then he bought a guitar, and when he wasn't at home, I would sneak in and just sort of look, open the case and look at it. And then I think I bought a couple of records, and I bought Queen one, and that was what that was really it. It was like I wanted to be a guitar player.
Yeah.
I was 13.
Yeah.
And I did I did a paper round to get the money, because my mum and dad, and rightly so, were like, well, if you want to do it, you got to get out there and earn the money for the guitar. So I went out and I got a paper round, and ironically, at the back then, the sort of notice board outside the paper shop, there was a guy there that said, Mick Large, his name was, selling Lerner acoustic guitars for £15. So I went round to see him, and I managed to knock him down to £13, and that was my first guitar. And at the same time, I said, "Do you do lessons?" And he said yes. And so I started going to him for lessons, and he was actually he actually played for Gene Pitney.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he was a great guitar player, good steel, pedal steel, and he taught me for about a year, and then he was like, I would annoy him because I wasn't reading music. I was unless he gave me a tune that I didn't know, I would just do it play by ear, and he knew that the sort of stuff I liked, and he was like, look, you're in a good place, you go on and do your thing now and stop having lessons, which was really good of him. I used to go and see local bands, and then I think I was about 14, 15. But like, it wasn't until I got to college. I used to go and see my friend's band and sort of play with them a little bit. But it was when I got to college that sort of met more people, and I guess, around 16, 17, that was, maybe a little, probably was 15, because I joined Weapon of Peace when I was 17, so.
Has your influence always been, I mean, you mentioned Queen one there, has it always been a more rocky guitar rather than sort of other types of styles, or do you play all styles?
It was, when I first started playing, and then the early years, I was very much into more kind of, I suppose, like prog rock in a way. I loved Yes and Pink Floyd and King Crimson. I was a Jeff Beck fan. Jeff still am. One of my biggest heroes. So I was definitely more into the sort of prog rock. But then I joined a band called Melvin's Marauders, which was a sort of local rock and roll band in Kidderminster that were all older than me. And it was a band that actually Robert Plant used to get up with and sing if he was around, kind of thing. It was a fun band. But they were all like really, there were some great players. And I met Robbie Blunt and Andy Sylvester, who were both both lived in Kidderminster, and they used to come. I was working in a music store as well at Shawnee Music, actually, at the time, and they used to come in there for a cup of coffee, and I learnt so much from them. They turned me much more onto the blues, and listening to Albert King and Freddie King and Buddy Guy, and just all of that whole blues scene, and that's where I really got into. So that became my thing.
I think I mentioned before we spoke when we started the interview. I play guitar, and it's interesting. My sort of influence. I had a very similar thing to you. Classical guitar lessons. After a year, I couldn't really be bothered with the music, and I'd started memorizing stuff. And the guy said to me, "You're not actually reading the music, are you?" I said,
Yeah.
"No, I'm not." He said, "Well, if you want to get to a certain level, you've got to." Anyway, we parted ways amicably and all the rest of it. And I was more into electric guitars then. But my sort of avenue, I don't think I regarded myself as agile enough for the prog stuff. I was more into the Thin Lizzies and T-Rex and Santana and Gary Moore and Hendrix. That was it's interesting how we all get to where we go. But then you got into the blues, and then I got into the blues, and it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I obviously, I mean, Hendrix, that's another, I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax, isn't it? There's never been anybody to touch him.
No.
It
was the sound, wasn't it, with Hendrix? It was that sound. I think with Hendrix, it was that big Strat sound that he had, like a wild animal almost. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think the most amazing thing is that if he was here today in the same way that he was back in the '60s, and you went to a show to see him, you'd just be as blown away today as people were back then. Which there's nobody, like, most people have some kind of, oh yeah, they were pretty good for the day, you know what I mean? Yeah. But he was just like, it's like he came from outer space or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it would have been nice to have seen him. I got a friend who, I think he was on his dad's shoulders, and he went to the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970. He says, I saw Hendrix. I was about 3, but...
I worked in the studio, Electric Ladyland, quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was nice to actually know that he'd been and recorded in this, you're in the same spot sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's as close as I got.
Yeah. So Bonham was the first sort of big break. Obviously, everybody knows the name Bonham from John Bonham from Led Zeppelin and his son Jason Bonham's band Bonham. And you were at the very beginning of the sort of band that's the original Bonham band, were you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess. I mean, actually being. Weapon of Peace was my first, if you like, big break, because they were pretty big, did fairly well in Europe. I was super young then, and then roll on Bonham. Me and Jason we were really good. We were drinking buddies. We were good mates and best mates, and then we started. So we were always both in different bands, and I think he was in Air Race at the time, and I was playing with Jim Hickman, I think, and then some other people, and we would jam together, but we would never had the opportunity to do a band thing.
No.
And then he did the forget what it was. It the I think it was it wasn't Live Aid. It was the Atlantic 50 years or something. I think I can't remember which thing it was, but I think it was that. And where he played with Robert and Jimmy and did like a Led Zeppelin thing. And from that, he was basically offered a deal by WTG, which was part of CBS, and to form a band basically. So he came back from that and sort of we went out for a beer. He's like, "Right, do you want to start a band?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he already knew John, the keyboard player, from that. He was down in Pevensey Bay, down by Hastings, Eastbourne. And so he came up and we started playing together, and it was just fantastic.
And you were quite heavily involved in the writing of the songs.
Yeah. It was very much a band, It was, that's how we just kind of pulled everything, split, it was a 4-way deal. And so it was just, there was no argument of who wrote the most or who didn't. It was like swings and roundabouts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, which is nice,
And this was in the early 90s, I believe, when Bonham became late 80s.
Yeah, it was. I think 88 was. 88 was when we started. 89, the album came out.
Right, and this was just before the sort of grunge scene, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. The first album did really, really well, and then we stupidly took way too long to make the second album. And by which time the whole music scene had changed.
Yeah.
So that album did not do well. And I think it's sad because I really do feel, like, hindsight obviously, but that if we had have bought that album out quicker, we would have had two albums, and hopefully the second one would have done well, reasonably well, and we'd have had a bit more of a solid kind of career, if you like, to sort of, we might have made it through that era. But
you had some great performances, and I was watching a concert that you did that featured Slash and Robert Plant and various other people coming up on stage with Paul Rodgers from Bad Company. How did it feel from sort of playing guitar as a teenager to suddenly being amongst your idols?
it was pretty ridiculous. I mean, I do remember, and there are a few good stories. I do remember one. There was 100 Years of Gibson Guitars, and that was the one where Slash and Brian May and forgetting names now. Journey's guitar player.
Oh, Neil Schon.
Neil Schon, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically the band was Jason and John, the bass player and drummer from Bonham, and me, and then
Yes.
Neil Schon was the sort of main, the soloist guest guitar player. And then for this Gibson thing, Brian was getting up and Slash was getting up. But I just remember we had a rehearsal at, I forgot that, one of those good old London places. And I remember being with Brian May and Neil Schon, and we're all comparing how do you play All Right Now? and I just had this sort of little flashback to when I'd be looking out my bedroom window playing All Right Now, and being like, this is kind of very bizarre that I'm with these massive guitar players, and then Brian was fantastic, and he such a nice person, and he not only did that gig, he got up at Hammersmith Odeon, and then he flew to Montreux Jazz Festival, and we did that, and he got up there, and so before we went on the one show, I did get to actually say to him that he had started me playing. Yes. Which was really, you know what I mean? It felt right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't like I wasn't being, by then we knew each other, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
I just a little geek question for us guitarists. How does Brian May get that sound?
It's like a lot of players, really. A lot of it's in there. I didn't really see any tricks, but I didn't have a lot of chance to really see it. You did really. I mean, I guess that guitar, it's got to be something in that. But just like when did gigs with Jeff Beck, it's like there's no mysterious pedal or thing in there. Which is pretty incredible, really.
Yeah. So certainly a beautiful sound. Just talking about your songwriting, Ian, and sort of getting towards what you do with the TV and films. How do you get ideas for it? How do you sort of develop I suppose what I'm trying to say is, how do you get an idea and how do you develop it? What's your process like?
I mean, I basically just sort of, I feel like things just come into my head. And it took me a long time to realize that a lot of things come into your head and they sound great in your head, but then to get them out is difficult. And a lot, and that's really the key, because what's in your head is this wonderful mixture of music that you've been listening to for the past 20, 30 years or whatever. So if you can get those ideas out, which is why I think I got it more into production, because I wanted to learn how to make the sounds, and I really found that as being the sort of key thing. It's like, and I'd make a point of really sort of trying to understand what I was hearing up here and go, right, really remember that, and then try and recreate it. And it still doesn't always work.
And is that sound that you get in your head, is it like the full sound? So it's not just the guitar riff, it's the percussion, the drums, the synths, the strings. Is it everything that you get?
I mean, sometimes, but a lot of times it will just be like a riff that will just some little thing that will spark you off. You know what I mean? And then the rest of it kind of comes from there.
Yeah. So you sort of build it up in layers, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, sometimes you get like a whole thing, but yeah, I would say more. More than often, it's more of just a basic idea, and then you just start playing it and go, then it starts going places.
I mean, assuming that you get a TV and a film company come through to you and say, look, we got this coming out. It's about whatever. And then you have to then go away and put the appropriate music to it. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, it varies. Most people I've worked with have been pretty much, do your thing kind of thing, which is great. Yeah. But sometimes they'll have temp music in, which sometimes helps, sometimes puts then, like the old demo-itis thing, you've got that sort of mark on it already. So that
so temp music being something they've put in just to give you an idea as to how they think it should sound.
Yeah, and also for them, they often use temp music just to cut the film too, especially if it's for rhythmical thing so they'll often, and sometimes that's awkward because they've used some like really great music that you can't use, but it's like, well, that sounds fantastic, but it's like it's like a Led Zeppelin song or something. Do you know what I mean? Or it could be anything. So then that's pretty hard because you've got to recapture that spirit without just copying the song,
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of bands and your own music, are you what are you doing at the moment? Are you still playing?
Now I'm just sort of just doing a bit of blues here and there. Get up and play live a couple of times a month, but no real serious band stuff.
Sorry.
I was going to say the last tour I did was playing with Debbie Bonham, actually. And opening up for Paul Rodgers, ironically, and Jeff Beck, which was just the most insane tour I've ever been on, which is fantastic.
And how long ago was that, Ian?
That's about it was before the pandemic, so
right, okay.
Yeah, but that's the last sort of big tour, if you like, I did.
Yeah, And what advice would you give any listeners who are perhaps guitarists, first of all, and they want to get from being a reasonably good bedroom guitarist to actually performing live and becoming a professional musician? What advice would you give them in?
Get out and play as much as you can, because that's what I was encouraged to do at that period of time. It's like, it's all very well and good being good in your bedroom, but you need to get out and play live. No matter how, what it is, it's going to help, and it's true. Because there's nothing, as there's nothing like, you can play a song a million times at home, but then, all of a sudden when you're on stage, it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I like the times when it works, when you get a boost and you think, oh, that wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Yes.
And of course, I guess, you've got to practice quite a lot as well, haven't you, really?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. A lot of practicing, but yeah, I feel like gigs, just watching guitar players like, say that I've known or whatever, and the ones that have got out and gigged more, I feel you progress more, or quickly. I would say perhaps you get there a bit quicker because it's, you can't mess around when it's live. You know what I mean? You're on the line, sort of thing. So I think that's.
Are you still picking the guitar up every day?
Not necessarily every day, but most days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably how I've always been. I've
Yeah.
never been a like, I got to practice an hour a day or something. I've
No.
never been that sort of a player.
And do you feel that your guitar technique has progressed over the last few years?
Just changes, I think I hope it's progressed a bit, but it's just, it's, you just feel things differently, and things that were important to me, 10 years ago, like, different things are more important to me now.
Yeah. Which is a great segue to my next question. Could you tell us about I mentioned at the beginning about your brewery, and it's great to hear about English cask ales. Tell us about your motivation for starting the brewery, Ian.
Well, the original motivation, which was not to start a brewery, which was just to make good beer, but like a small brewery. I don't know. I just basically living in the States for all this time, and when I first came out in the 80s, there was, the only thing on tap was Budweiser, and every once in a while you might find Boddingtons, or possibly Old Speckled Hen, but that was it. And then roll on to 10 years ago, and the whole craft brewing scene blew up out here, which is fantastic because there's now lots of beer, but it was all so high in alcohol content and so hoppy that I literally back then I had my local, was a pub called Dogwood here in Beacon, and I used to go there, and they had 16 taps, and I would look at sit there and look at the board and just be like, there's 16 taps of beer and there's not one I want to drink. And so I had this conversation with the guy from the Bewdley Brewery back in England.
Oh yeah.
And just said, could I make, because I love their beer. And he's like, I was like, could I make this beer? And he's like, yeah, of course you could. So he gave me a book, and we become really good friends. I sort of I've been there and brewed with them to sort of learn. And they're like, he's a bit of a mentor when I need, questions.
Yes.
So trying to think how it all, so really what happened, I was working on the cask ale, making a real pint, as it were. And then the pandemic hit, and that I read this blog on this guy who tried to open a brewery in his house, but failed because of planning permission. So I went to the town, got planning permission, and converted the downstairs of my place into like it was a total pandemic project. I was digging it out myself, putting the drains in, and I got all the licensing, and it was pretty crazy, really, and still is to have a brewery underneath my house. It's very small, but it.
Oh, you're basically on top of it.
Oh yeah. Where I am now, I'm in the studio, and the brewery is right below, which is kind of perfect.
What size brewery is it in terms of barrels?
It's a one barrel at the moment, but I'm just in the process of expanding it to I think I can squeeze a 3-barrel system in there. But it's such an advantage, obviously, to have it here and not be paying rent, that I can afford to do what I want to do, which is cask, and not be trying to push out kegs to sort of pay the bills, as it were.
Yeah, and I guess being sort of on top of it, you can quickly pop down and tinker, checking levels and things like that without having to commute somewhere.
It's great. In the mornings, I can, I wake up early, flick on the water to start heating the water up, and, have breakfast, and then go down and start brewing. So it's.
Are you working in centigrade like we do in the UK, or are you in Fahrenheit?
It's sort of an interesting, and brewing is a really interesting thing in that regard, because obviously my age, I kind of how old I was when decimalization came in, but all I know is that moving to America, which is obviously all imperial, well, not imperial, but same sort of thing. I sort of fell back into that very easily,
Yes.
and the whole liters and centimeters and centigrade were a total mystery to me. You know, it's just like because I guess that's what I learned as a kid, and then to go back to it, it felt very natural. Brewing is just like a bit of a nightmare because it's a lot of people like over here. Some of them will do liters, but a lot of it is gallons. But then a lot will weigh in kilograms. Like I do, all my measurements, weight measurements, kilograms and grams, and then most of my temperatures are centigrade. But then I do flip some, you know.
Yeah, and of course the US gallon is different to the British gallon, isn't
right? Because it's like
even more
the imperial thing, but it's not the imperial. You know, like a 6. You know, I've got an English pub here that I supply beer to down in Mount Kisco called the Ambleside, which is a great place, and they actually got proper 20-ounce beer glasses to serve in, which is rare over here.
Well, I mentioned before we went on air that I've got a little brewery in my garage, which isn't the same size as yours. It's what is it? It's a 5-gallon brewery, which is the sort of typical homebrew thing. But it is all grain brewing.
Yeah, that's what I used to have,
proper all grain stuff, and it's not a grain father. It is a 3-barrel system with your hot liquor tank, mash tun, and then the copper, as they used to call it, for boiling. But what I like about it, as opposed to to be fair, I haven't used a grain father, and I'm sure they're very good, but I do like the fact that you've got the 3 vessels and you've got all the variables under your control, and everything's manual. There's no pumps or anything.
No, that's very much, especially brewing with the guys in Bewdley at the Bewdley Brewery. The system there is very traditional.
Is it?
And that's the mash tun. They've got it's called a Valentine arm on it, so it's just gravity that's the hot liquor tank is up high, which I've done with mine, so it's gravity fed basically. And then the only time you're pumping it is from there into the copper, and so I've done the same. And there's a big brewery here called Hudson Valley Brewery, and they've been great too, really helpful. They're a big brewery, but they help me out all sorts.
Yes.
But their system is really, really computerized. And the guy, I talked to the guys at Brew It, and they actually can't do certain things because it just won't. It's a great system, but I don't know. I like the old school way.
Yeah. And how many? I mean, a lot of people sort of say, how long does it take to make beer? And I usually say to them, well, officially 6 weeks, but I know that when you're brewing on a larger scale, it tends to ferment a bit quicker. Is that right? 3 or 4 days rather than a week or 2 weeks?
Yeah. Cask. I find that 3 weeks is basically, sort of. I do like a week in the fermenter, then chill it down for a few days, and then into the cask, and then it needs to obviously second fermentation in the cask, and then and then let it condition for a while.
I must admit, Ian, talking about this, I'm getting quite thirsty now.
I know it's a bit early for me.
It's 4:45 in the UK.
You're right.
We're going down the pub at 5 o'clock. So, but just on your beers that you make, is it just bitter, or do you make other beers as well?
No, I do. I do a mild, bitter. Do a couple of different bitters. I guess I do about 3 different bitters. Do a dark mild, a stout, and all which have been interesting to sort of do. I'm not really a stout drinker, but I wanted to make it. But I don't really like Guinness, so I've tried to make it, more like Murphy's. And there's a third one, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, there's the Brewdog's Black Heart, which is quite nice. But I think that's a new one. Yeah, Murphy's is the other one, isn't it?
Yeah, Murphy's, and I always forget the name of it, but it's another Irish one.
Oh, is it?
But I feel the combination is and people like it, so
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask, how has it been received in where you are?
I mean, originally I put it on at Dogwood, which is my local, and that was the goal, to be able to sit at the pub and have a decent beer, and it was fantastic, And then I got it into the couple of places in Manhattan.
Oh, did you?
And it started doing well there.
Yeah.
And then I'm sort of rolling on forward. This guy came to see me. He was opening a pub down in Mount Kisco, and they wanted to put four beer engines in there and have me make all the beer for that. And it's going amazing there. It's sort of bizarre. I think after they opened, the first time I went down there, I almost thought somebody was playing a joke on me, because I walked into the pub and I looked around, and I think 90% of the people were drinking my beer.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
I was like, so this is a wind up. Somebody's doing, but so we're doing like the same sort of numbers there as like an English pub would expect.
That's fantastic.
Which is great.
And are you using British ingredients?
Yes, yeah.
Are you? So the barley comes over from the UK?
Yeah, good old Marisota.
Okay. Yeah.
And the hops, yeah. So you can get it quite. There's one big distributor here that I can get it all from. So it's which makes it good. The only one thing you can't do is obviously the yeast. You can't get that. That's the.
And whose yeast do you use?
I use the Sapphire, the 04, good old. It's a good. I think it's. Some people don't like it, and others do, but it's always worked great for me. And it's the Bewdley guys told me that.
Is that the Nottingham yeast?
It's not. I've used that as well, though. That's good. Yeah.
Mm. And is it dried powdered yeast that you use?
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, well, we're really getting geeky on this, aren't we? But I'm sure we've got some listeners who are brewers. We could talk about this for hours. I'm conscious of the time.
So back to music, right?
Yeah. So what are the projects you have coming up?
It's quiet at the moment. I just finished like a short movie, and it's in a way kind of welcoming. It's a little bit quiet. Summer often is. So, but there's a couple of little things floating around. But I'm sort of it's a good time to sort of redo things in the studio and the brewery, which is it's kind of. It's been a bit hectic, so I'm liking a little bit of a breather.
Yeah. Well, and do you have anybody that you're producing at the moment in terms of other artists in your studio?
Not like I work with. There's a couple of local people that I've done a few things with, but again, I've been between the film stuff and the brewery got so busy the last 6 months that I just have had no time. It's been a bit crazy, to be honest.
Yeah. And where can people find out more about your work? Yeah.
I've got a website, ianhatton.com, and the brewery as well, oldglenhambrewery.com. Both of them, I got to be honest, they're not very up to date, but it's not one of my strengths is social media and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I do my best.
Well, we'll put the links on the show notes. Yeah, you mentioned earlier, Ian, about the tour with Debbie Bonham. Just tell us a bit about it, could you? Yeah,
it was great. I mean, I played with Debbie many years ago. We had in a band with her, and then we've always been great friends. And this thing came out of the blue. It was basically to do as a duo, which was I've never done anything like that before. It's pretty scary just to be up there with a guitar and Deb singing in front of 10, 15,000 people. So it was a little nerve wracking. But the main thing, obviously, was that Jeff Beck was on the bill, and got to meet him and hang out a little bit, and more than anything, just watch him play every night. And I just, you see videos of him playing, but to see him and to see his gear, I got really, really super friendly with his tech, who was again a really nice guy, and I became the guy that they'd send stuff for Jeff to try, and his tech would be like, oh, we got this to try tonight, so I'd be the guinea pig, which I obviously welcomed,
more than happy.
Yes. But I just can't, I still can't get over how amazing the player is, and it's all in his hands. He never, there's no tuner in his pedal board. He just, there's nothing in there really that a couple of old pedals and nothing in there that those secrets, and just that the one great thing was he had one of his amps that he used. He had a couple of Marshall combos, and then these heads with a Marshall cab, but the Marshall cab, obviously because it was loud, he got it wound up, it would face backwards, so it faced backstage.
Yeah.
So I would just pull up a chair behind the curtain, sort of thing, and basically, depending where you position yourself, you could just you get as much of the band as you wanted. But it was basically just hearing him play. It still blows my mind how fantastic a guitar player is, and just his feel is just unbelievable.
And does he not use a plectrum? Does he just use his fingers?
Just fingers, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And he's constantly changing stuff. He's constantly changing the tone on his guitar. It's like it's amazing to see.
Yeah.
And I also love the fact that there obviously there was Paul Rodgers and Hart, bunch of bands playing there, and everybody had their rack of 7, 10 guitars or whatever. And then you go over to Jeff's station and you got one guitar.
Oh, simplicity. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's the guitar he used, and the other one he had with him on the bus, so he got and his tech was it's kind of the easiest. He said it's Jeff Beck, but it's sort of the easiest tech gig you could get, because you give it to him in tune at the start of the gig, and that's it. You don't. There's no. That's just make sure he's okay.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of Jeff Beck, I think of a white Fender Stratocaster. Is that still?
Yeah,
what
that's what he was using. Yeah.
Well, Ian, it's been a really interesting conversation, and great to hear about the much varied interest that you have, which I guess come out of your creativity. My guest today has been Ian Hatton, and you'll find links to Ian's work in the show notes. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I would be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.